Hello and welcome, and thank you very much for joining this session. My name is Laïla, and in a second I will share my screen, introduce myself and launch into the session. I want to thank from the bottom of my heart, Linda Riley, Fiona Marshall, and everyone in the team who has worked really hard to produce a fantastic program of events over the 5 days this week. I think we've got 26 events over 5 days, phenomenal. And really thank you to Linda for ensuring that lesbians are visible, celebrated and validated at least 1 week in the year. So I'm just going to share my screen right now. And we can start launching into the session. There we go. Okay, that should work. Excellent. So the session is called Exploring Intersectionality Through the Lesbian Lens. A little bit about myself. My name is Laïla El-Mitoui. My pronouns are she, her. I'm based in the UK. I work as an equity educator. So I just deliver training to organizations through lemeducation.com. I also run a couple of conferences a year. One is Educating Out Racism, and the other one is Pride in Education, which is looking at LGBTIQA plus inclusion in primary, secondary, further education and universities. And the next one is on the 25th of June. I also founded and chair Proud London Councils, which is the Pan-London Forum for LGBTQ plus staff networks in local authorities in the UK, in the capital. And I also founded and one of the 3 co-chairs for UK Queer Arabs. Finally, I am very honored to have been listed on the top 100 Pride Power list last year and been awarded the honor of being Stonewall Lesbian Role Model of the Year in 2020. So that's me. I'm an activist, an educator, and I organize conferences in a nutshell. So let's start. This session is a very safe space. Feel free to reach out to me to ask me any questions. I will leave you my email address at the end. Curiosity did not kill the cat, and actually mistakes help us learn and grow. So many of you might be familiar with intersectionality, but I'm going to have a look at it through my own personal lived experience. And through this session, I hope that you will gain a better understanding of intersecting identities, but also power and privilege. I will offer you some practical tips for challenging microaggressions and becoming a stronger intersectional ally. So what is intersectionality? Professor Kimberly Crenshaw at Columbia University first coined the term in the 80s, and she referred to it as being the connected nature of our social identities, such as race, class, and gender, as they apply to a given individual or group, used to look at the overlap between different forms of disadvantage. It related originally specifically to the struggle that Black and Indigenous feminists and other women of color faced in feminism at large. But what does it actually mean? Let's have a look at a really short video that explains it much better.
What is intersectionality? Intersectionality is a way of understanding social relations by examining intersecting forms of discrimination. This means acknowledging that social systems are complicated and that many forms of oppression, like racism, sexism, and ageism, might be present and active at the same time in a person's life. Everyday approaches to building equality tend to focus on one type of discrimination, for instance, sexism, and then work to address only that specific concern. But while the career of a young, white and able-bodied woman might improve with gender equality protections, an older, Black, disabled lesbian may continue to be hampered by racism, ageism, ableism and homophobia in the workplace. Intersectionality is about understanding and addressing all potential roadblocks to an individual or group's well-being. But it's not as simple as just adding up oppressions and addressing each one individually. Racism, sexism and ableism exist on their own. but when combined, they compound and transform the experience of oppression. Intersectionality acknowledges that unique oppressions exist, but is also dedicated to understanding how they change in combination. The roots of intersectionality lie within the Black feminist movement, with legal scholar Kimberly Crenshaw originating the term. Crenshaw felt that anti-racist and feminist movements were both overlooking the unique challenges faced by Black women. She stated that legislation about race is framed to protect Black men, and legislation about sexism is understood to protect white women. So simply combining racism and sexism together does not therefore protect Black women. Intersectional theory is now applied across a range of social divisions and also to understandings of domination, such as those associated with whiteness, masculinity, and heterosexuality. Intersectionality is not only about multiple identities, and it's not a simple answer to solving problems around equality and diversity. It is, however, an essential framework as we truly engage with issues around privilege and power and work to bring them into the open. Intersectionality means listening to others, examining our own privileges, and asking questions about who may be excluded or adversely affected by our work. As importantly, it means taking measurable action to invite, include, and centre the voices and work of marginalised individuals.
Really fascinating, because I think this very, very short video actually really summarises really well what intersectionality means. And if I think about my own personal experience of intersectionality, I am a feminine presenting woman. I am cisgender, which means that I identify with the gender that I was assigned at birth. I'm a lesbian of Arabic descent. I have a Muslim sounding surname and an invisible disability. So I'm just going to pause for a minute and get you to reflect and think how you think all of these identities that make me have helped, hindered, impacted my career. As a feminine presenting woman, I have often been assumed by other people that I'm actually straight. And as a person of Arabic descent, people make a lot of assumptions about how my family treats me, or because my name is El Mitwi, people assume that I'm Muslim. So all of these mean that my actual authentic self hasn't always been recognized. And as a woman, I have experienced misogyny, sexism, as a lesbian, homophobia, as a person with a Muslim sounding surname, Islamophobia, as a woman of color, racism. So if you think about all of these different forms of oppression coming from different people at different times on a regular basis, compared to someone who's straight and white, cisgender and male, who would not experience these forms of discrimination and oppression, the impact that it has had on my ability to believe in myself, my mental health, my self-worth, has been at times really difficult to deal with. In order for us to understand intersectionality, we need to have a look at forms of oppression, but also understand privilege. And I've got another really short video which helps us examine privilege.
Some people are born into families where they have to walk miles just to get water. All I have to do is turn on a faucet. That's privilege.
I think privilege is when some people have some things and other people don't have things.
I feel privilege is something that you don't even really have control over.
I think it'd be silly for me to say I don't have a fair amount of privilege, considering like
the country I live in and the job I get to do and the college I was allowed to go to.
I suppose being a white male will help me end up somewhere towards the front, but I'll take a few steps back from being gay.
I don't think I'll make it to the front. I think I'll maybe be in the middle. That's just the gut feeling I have.
If your parents work nights and weekends to support your family, take one step back. If you can show affection for your romantic partner in public without fear of ridicule or violence, take one step forward. If you were embarrassed about your clothes or house while growing up, take one step back. If you have ever been diagnosed as having a physical or mental illness or disability, take one step back. If you have ever been bullied or made fun of based on something you can't change, take one step back. If you get time off for your religious holidays, take one step forward. If you came from a supportive family environment, if you can see a doctor whenever you feel the need, if you are able to move through the world without fear of sexual assault, if you took out loans for your education, if there were more than 50 books in your house growing up. So these are your final positions.
I think it felt kind of strange for everyone.
It's a hard thing to discuss or even reflect on.
It was very awkward.
I think when you can represent it so visually like this and so immediately, it definitely takes on a new form.
I think we were like all joking around in the beginning. It was pretty lighthearted, and as soon as the questions started coming in, the mood shifted immediately, and we all it was just silent.
Just looking back and seeing like a bunch of people behind you is not a good feeling.
It's like weird how you want to like hold on to explaining a certain privilege, like, oh, but that's not actually me, because like I had to work really hard for that. So it's weird to like take a step forward when you feel like you're taking a step forward with someone else, but you wear a lot of the baggage of like how those things were hard.
It was like more emotional than I thought it would be.
It reminded me of when they talk about slavery in high school and you feel like angry for a few days, but then you just realize like, this is how it is.
For me, it was kind of frustrating almost to look back and see how much further some people were behind me, and realizing that, you know, a lot of that stuff, no amount of hard work or even legislation can make up that gap.
It's interesting being an Asian American because you're not really sure where you fall on the spectrum of privilege.
I know that for me, one of the reasons I ended up so far back was that there are questions around safety as an African American, as a woman, as a gay woman. There are just so many different ways that I don't feel safe.
I feel like I just learned to be grateful for what you have. You know, we're in such a huge society where it's always complaining about what you don't have.
It just shows you that for some families, like each family, you're meant to do better. My grandparents did good, my parents did good, and I'll do even better.
I do think if you're not like aware of privilege, you should do this exercise, but it's more complicated.
So privilege, as we've seen in the video, is no longer about wealth or status. You are privileged if you can walk in the street and hold your partner's hand without fear of discrimination. If you don't need to check whether a route to a venue is wheelchair accessible. If you can walk into a gender toilet and do your business without fear of discrimination. If you have never been rejected because of your name, of your skin color, or if your parents, family, relatives, people who brought you up accept you for who you are. I really like this quote from Janaya Khan, who is the founder of the BLM movement in Toronto, who states that privilege isn't about what we've gone through, it's about what we haven't had to go through. And I think we all have experienced different levels of privilege and oppression, but some of us more than others. Sylvia Duckworth designed this wheel of power and privilege, which is really great tool to look at where we are in the wheel. So at the center would be a white, highly educated, able-bodied, heterosexual, neurotypical, slim, rich person, fluent in English or in the language of the countries where they live in. And then if you look at the outside of the ring, we've got, you know, being Black, having little education, significantly disabled, being lesbian, bi, pansexual, asexual, being significantly neurodiverse, etc., etc. So I really like this will, and even though it doesn't mention things like social class or family status, for example, if you're a single parent, there are quite a few things missing. I think it's a really good start to have a conversation about where you are within the wheel of power and privilege and the people that you interact with. And if you're interested in this, I deliver a range of training sessions on how to diversify recruitment and challenge biases in the workplace. So that's privilege. But what does it mean in practice? Professor Kimberly Crenshaw revisited 3 decades later the definition of intersectionality, and she stated that it's not identity politics on steroids. It's not a mechanism to turn white men into the new pariah. It's basically a lens, a prism for seeing the way in which various forms of inequality often operate together and exacerbate each other. I mean, the best way to describe it is to have a look at some example of microaggressions. I posted on the Diva community Facebook group, which has nearly 13,000 people on it, a question about what kind of recent example of microaggressions or micro-incivilities the members had faced. And as a lesbian, when I read through them, I literally had pages and pages of comments, and these were some of the recurring ones. So who makes the male role in bed? I bet I could turn you. How can you be the wife? Surely one of you is the husband. So people are assuming that we should fit within a heteronormative model. What do you do in bed? I mean, what business is it of theirs? Somebody stated, you're disabled, surely you can't have sex or even be a lesbian. You don't look gay, as a compliment. You're too pretty to be a lesbian. Must have been hard for your family. And some of them are based on my real experience as well. When I was reading the comments, I was thinking, gosh, it's 2022 and lesbians and bi women are still experiencing this type of daily, regular microaggressions and micro-incivilities. So I think in order to be an ally, we need to be able to identify these. I mean, when someone says you don't look gay, they mean it as a compliment, but really what they're saying, or if they're saying you're too pretty to be a lesbian, are all lesbians ugly? I don't think so, my friend. So yeah, we need to be able to recognize microaggression and challenge them. And how do we do that? First of all, we need to acknowledge our own bias, but also acknowledge our own power, privilege, and area of influence. For me, it's about questioning myself. When I hear something or see something, I need to, or if I say something and somebody gives me some feedback, I need to accept it. If a person of color says, this is racist, just apologize and move on. I mean, a lot of people, when I challenge them, respond to me saying, but I'm not homophobic. My best friend is gay. Yes, that's not what I'm saying. I was challenging the statement, not the person. And as a lesbian, it's about picking my battles and practicing self-care. If I was to respond to every single microaggression, sometimes I just let it go because I just don't have the energy to fight it. So we need to challenge microaggressions. If you work in an organization and you're in a position of leadership, how about having it on as an agenda item in your team meetings, saying, has anybody experienced any microaggression? You'd be surprised, especially if you have a super diverse workforce, what comes out. And it's about getting support from colleagues and manager. And as I said earlier, challenging the statement, not the person. So these are some examples of how to challenge the statement and not the person. Asking for clarification. Could you say more about what you mean by that? How have you come to think to that? Or maybe separating the intent from the impact. I know you didn't realize this, But when you said you're too pretty to be a lesbian, it was hurtful and offensive because it's assuming that all lesbians are ugly. Instead, you could just say, you're pretty, simple, or sharing your own process. I noticed that you said that. I used to say that too, but then I learned that it wasn't appropriate. So these are like 3 really practical assertiveness tools that one can use to challenge microaggressions. And acknowledging your power and privilege. If you're straight and you hear something, please say something, because it's a lot easier to challenge homophobia as a straight person than it is as a lesbian, gay, bi, trans, or non-binary person who's receiving discriminatory remarks. Language matters. It's very important to be mindful of gendered greetings. Ladies and gentlemen, so yesterday, use siblings rather than brothers or sister, partner instead of husband and wife, and ask for pronoun. We need to avoid using ableist language. If someone is blind, do not say, as you can see. If someone is very organized, then not a little bit OCD. And also try to avoid generalizing. Older drivers are a liability. We could say, as we get older, sight loss is more common, and as a result, driving may become more difficult. So it's about being a little bit more nuanced in the language that we use, and words have power. Language matters. My name is Laïla, not Lila, Laïla, and it's very important to me because it's a very strong part of my identity. So please ask for the correct pronunciation. If you're not sure of something, it's fine not to know something, but find out where to go to get reputable answer. And instead of making assumptions about biological parents and assuming that there's a mum and a dad, we can say carer, guardian, parent, caregiver, grown-up, responsible adults. So language is really important for me. Think about the physical and virtual space where you operate. Do we have clearly visible sign of allyship? Do you have a inclusive rainbow flag in your prayer and contemplation rooms? Do you have gender neutral toilets? Think about the physical space as well as your website. Do you have inclusive breastfeeding spaces, neutral language, signs, etc. So it's about accessibility and visibility within the physical and virtual environment. Who represents your community and identity at the highest level in the workplace? Can everyone fully recognize themselves? Do you feel valued, respected, celebrated? Can everyone access everything? Is the environment welcoming? Symbols and signs make a huge difference. And there's a lot of ways that our community can be celebrated 365 days a year. Are the protected characteristics celebrated intersectionally throughout the calendar? I am a lesbian 365 days a year, not just for Lesbian Visibility Week. Thank you very much. And if you're celebrating Black History Month, think about, if not already done, including queer people of color. For International Women's Day, think about including lesbian and trans women, etc. Visibility does matter. And the more we are represented, the more we are celebrated, the better society we create, but also the greater sense of belonging someone will feel in the workplace. When we communicate, are the data collection tools that we use inclusive of our community, the job adverts, social media? Do we have our pronouns in our email signature on our social media profile? It's about every step of the way, every day, from job advert until the person leaves the organization, from resident support to communication if you work for in local authority or the public sector. And it does make a difference, and it has to be intentional and holistic. So throughout the whole organization, and with very, very clear leadership, senior leadership commitment. To end this session, I think it's about putting people at the heart of everything we do. And we need to work in a way that is trauma-informed, bias-aware, and compassionate. At the end of the day, we're all on a spectrum, from our skin color, from the whitest to the darkest, from our body sizes, our abilities, and sexual orientation, gender identities, and expressions are no different. It's about being kind, being compassionate. I'll end with a quote. When a flower doesn't bloom, you fix the environment in which it grows, not the flower, by the poet Alexander Den Hayer. I hope I pronounced it correctly. I'd like to thank you all so very much for attending this session. My name is Laïla, and I deliver training and public speaking through lemeducation.com, and this is my email. So feel free to reach out if you've got any questions, you want to find out more, or you are interested in making your workplace more inclusive. Thank you so much for joining us today. I hope you've learned something. Feel free to share this video and the rest of the program for Lesbian Visibility Week. And I wish you all a very good day. Thank you.